Hey guys, welcome back to Boring History Episodes, where history doesn't shout through books, but hums softly beneath the candle's glow. Tonight, we travel to a moment when the world tilted, when power no longer belonged to armor or bloodline, but to the calloused hands of men who could bend a bow. It was a single afternoon when England's archers rewrote the laws of war, and the age of knights began to die quietly beneath a storm. They said knights ruled the world, steel on horseback, glory wrapped in gold. But at Crécy, under a sky heavy with rain, that illusion finally broke. The storm that came wasn't thunder, but arrows, thousands of them, rising from the hands of men born poor and falling upon those born proud. Lances shattered before they ever reached the hill, and armor turned into a prison. In one long, breathless afternoon, the age of chivalry sank into the mud, silenced by the hum of the longbow. You open your eyes. The room is dim, the air thick with the scent of rain. As you reach for your blanket, soft and coarse like an old banner, thunder murmurs outside like distant drums. You can almost hear it, the draw of a bowstring, the whisper of history waking again. Before we travel, take a breath. If you're new here, this is where we slow time together, one quiet story at a time. If this kind of calm history feels like home, tap like. And if you'd like more quiet nights like this, hit subscribe. I'll be here, waiting with another story. Now, dim the lights. Let the fan hum like wind over grass. Let your thoughts slow, and let the noise outside drift away, because we're not in your room anymore. You're standing on a hill of wet earth in northern France. The rain has just stopped, but the air still trembles. It's August 1346, and 30,000 armored men are about to ride into history and never rise again. The wind that morning smells of wet soil and iron, as somewhere in the grey mist of northern France, a crow shakes the rain from its feathers, unaware that today it will feast like royalty. Neither do the men. 9,000 of them stand on a slope above a small village named Crécy-en-Ponthieu, a name you'd forget if not for what's about to happen. Cold, damp and tired, they've marched for weeks, chased across fields and streams, sleeping where the ground allows and eating where luck grants. But for once, the English king has found high ground, and tonight he intends to keep it. Edward III, tall, lean, a little too aware of his own destiny, looks across the muddy valley. Somewhere beyond that fog, 30,000 Frenchmen are approaching, their armor glinting through the haze, steel catching the last light of a bruised sky. You can almost hear their confidence from here, like metallic laughter rolling down the hill. But the English do not laugh. Instead, they dig. They drive sharpened stakes into the mud, string their bows, and wait. There are no trumpets, no speeches, only the soft creak of yew bending under tension. Discipline, not drama. The French believe the battle will be short, as they always do. For 200 years, they've ruled the art of war from horseback, shining, stomping, unstoppable. The knight, that glittering animal of Europe, has never bowed to a farmer. Why would he? A drop of rain hits the back of your neck, followed by another and another. The storm rolls in, just as pride always does. Quietly at first, then all at once. The ground turns soft, then greedy, clinging to boots, to horses, to men. Across the field, the French banners still dance proudly, stitched with lions and lilies. They do not notice the archers yet, and they rarely do. Peasants with strings, criminals with sticks, hardly worth a prayer. But what they don't see, not yet, is the geometry of death that Edward has built. A hill for height, mud for slowing hooves, stakes for stopping them, and 5,000 longbows ready to unmake centuries of arrogance. Each bow stands taller than the man who draws it. Each arrow, as thick as a finger, flies faster than any horse can charge, and the men holding them are not soldiers of birth, but soldiers of habit. By English law, every man must train with the bow every Sunday. Archery is not a skill here, it's a religion. You can picture them now, sleeves rolled up, shoulders wet, hands raw. The string presses into their fingertips until they blister, then callous, then harden into something inhuman. They shoot until muscle becomes memory, and memory becomes instinct. They do not think about glory. They think about distance, wind, and draw. Somewhere down the slope, a French horn blares, proud and too proud for what's about to come. Rain hits metal with a dull, mocking applause, and you can almost hear the horses hesitate, their nostrils wide, their hooves sinking into the earth. The knights curse the mud, not realizing it's already chosen sides. Edward watches silently. He doesn't command the storm, he just lets it work for him. That's the secret of kings who last. They know when not to move. He adjusts his cloak, damp wool clinging to his shoulders, and says something his men will later repeat as legend. Let them come. The words fall softly, so softly you could miss them under the rain, but they carry through the line like a current, steady, electric, inevitable. You glance toward the archers. No shouting, no drumbeat. Only the low hum of bowstrings being tested. One man wipes his hands on the grass. Another knocks an arrow and waits. They look like they're praying, but it's not for mercy. Far below, the French knights jostle for position, their banners colliding in the wind. They argue, even here, over who will strike first, because even in war, rank matters more than reason. The king wants them to rest until morning, but they want to charge now. They always want to charge now. It's a strange thing, pride. It makes men hurry toward their own ending, as if the sooner they die, the more glorious it will be. The English archers shift slightly, their boots sinking deeper. Rain pools around the stakes, and the sky lowers itself like a lid. Somewhere, thunder rolls, and someone mutters, "They're coming." No one answers. You feel it before you see it, the tremor in the ground, faint at first, then growing. The rhythm of hooves, multiplied by thousands, turning the earth into a drumbeat of doom. The French army fills the valley, banners, armor, muscle, and mistake. To watch it must have been beautiful, in a cruel way. The charge of 1,000 horses, the glitter of wet steel, the thunder of faith in the wrong idea. For a moment, it looks like history itself is galloping straight at you. Then, silence. That breath between arrogance and annihilation, the moment before the first arrow sings. The longbowmen raise their arms as one. Yew bends, gut tightens. The sky darkens, not with clouds, but with feathers. And that, right there, is where the romance ends. The first volley hits before the French even realize the war has changed. Armor that once made men untouchable now becomes a coffin that breathes. Horses scream, men fall. And in less than a minute, 5 centuries of tradition start bleeding into the mud. You could almost feel sorry for them, if they hadn't been so sure of themselves. Rain keeps falling. The archers reload, and Edward doesn't move, because he doesn't need to. The slope belongs to the longbows now. The field belongs to the mud. And the future belongs to men who shoot, not ride. A cold fact settles into the night. Sometimes, history turns not with the sword, but with the sound of string and feather. The wind shifts. The crows return. They always know when it's safe to eat. The storm doesn't wait for permission. It comes like impatience made visible, fast, loud, and inconvenient. Thunder murmurs somewhere beyond the hills of Crécy, rolling like a distant argument between gods who've grown tired of men pretending to be divine. Rain starts as a whisper, then becomes a sentence, then a punishment. Mud drinks greedily, armor groans, and horses shift their weight, uneasy. Across the soaked valley, the French army appears, enormous, glittering, and very, very late. 30,000 men, banners shining with saints who are about to take the night off, have been marching all day, hungry, wet, irritated, the kind of irritation that only nobility can afford. King Philip VI wants to wait until morning. He wants to feed his men, dry their powder, and line up the Genoese crossbowmen properly. But his knights, the dukes, the counts, the high-born sons of everyone who matters, they don't care. They're here for one thing, to be seen. And nothing says valor like charging too early into the wrong direction. One lord spurs his horse forward. Another follows, because no one of noble blood can stand to be second. It spreads like fire in tall grass, pride disguised as bravery. Philip's orders dissolve in the wind, and just like that, history loses its patience too. You can picture it now. A sea of wet banners, half slumped under the rain. The Genoese mercenaries in front, foreign faces hired to do the dangerous part, carry crossbows, not longbows. Shorter range, slower reload, but still deadly, in theory. Except their bowstrings are wet, soaked, useless. They raise their weapons anyway, because they're paid to pretend. The bolts sputter out halfway, like breathless sighs in the storm. A few land harmlessly in the mud near the English lines, not even an insult. Behind them, French nobles scoff. Cowards, they shout, safe behind their gilded helmets. The Genoese start falling back, hands raised, shouting that their strings are ruined. But pride is deaf, especially when it wears armor worth more than a village. The knights lower their lances. The horns sound again, and in the rain, the French cavalry charges. Not the English, but their own allies. It's a massacre before the battle even begins. Crossbowmen trampled by horses that were supposed to protect them. Metal on mud, mud on bone. A symphony of arrogance. From the hill, the English watch in silence. You can imagine one archer turning to another, muttering something halfway between disbelief and pity. Maybe even laughter. A tired, quiet laugh, the kind that comes from watching someone fall into a hole you warned them about. The rain keeps falling, the valley turns into a brown sea, and the French keep pushing forward because pride doesn't know how to stop once it's moving. Behind them, King Philip shouts himself hoarse, but no one listens to a king when glory is within reach. It's strange how often disaster begins, with enthusiasm. No strategy, just the desperate urge to be remembered, and the certainty that courage alone will rewrite physics. Spoiler, it doesn't. The English archers stand ready, quiet as tombstones. They've kept their bowstrings dry, tucked under caps and cloaks, protected like relics. When they pull them taut, the sound cuts through the rain like something holy. 1,000 strings, a single heartbeat. Below them, the French knights splash and curse, their horses struggling to climb. Lances wobble, feathers soak. The field that looked so small from the hill now feels endless, a swamp that eats confidence for breakfast. Philip's nobles press harder, shouting over the rain. They're no longer fighting the English. They're fighting mud, panic, and the sinking feeling that something ancient is ending. The English longbows rise, not yet to fire, just lifted, like a warning. The French don't notice, or maybe they do, but noticing requires humility, and humility isn't fashionable among men who wear gold on their knees. The first volleys don't come yet, that will happen soon. But this moment, this wet, stupid, beautiful moment, is where the world begins to change. Because you can almost feel history laughing, quietly, in that English way that isn't cruel, but isn't kind either. The kind of laugh that says, "You had this coming." There's a strange peace before catastrophe. Everything slows down. The horses breathe clouds. the rain falls in thick, warm curtains. And somewhere, between thunder and heartbeat, you realize no one can stop what's about to happen. Not the king, not the saints, not the 1,000 years of glittering armor behind them. This is the price of impatience. The bill has just arrived. A French knight wipes rain from his visor, squinting through the downpour. He sees the English hill, the faint glint of helmets, the dark forest behind them. He doesn't see the trenches cut into the slope, or the wooden stakes waiting like teeth, or the peasants who are about to make him irrelevant. He lowers his lance. His horse snorts, shivering, hating the mud. The knight mutters a short, almost embarrassed prayer, because he still believes God prefers noblemen. He's wrong. Today, God prefers geometry. The slope, the stakes, the rain. They all whisper the same thing. Not today. But pride is loud, and it drowns out warnings. And so the knights ride, downhill, uphill, into chaos. Louder than thunder, heavier than reason. And behind them, a king who already knows it's over, but can't stop the story from being written. The storm lightens for a breath, as if heaven itself wants a better view. Mud splashes up to knees, to chest, to visor. The horses stumble, the banners drag, and the thunder of hooves begins to sound more like drowning. High on the hill, Edward watches. He doesn't smile. He just waits for the moment when pride finally reaches his wall of arrows. He waits because every wise man knows you don't stop arrogance. You let it exhaust itself first, and when it does, you simply draw the bow. The storm has quieted, but only on the surface. Somewhere beneath the hiss of rain, the air holds its breath, and every sound feels sharpened. The creak of wood, the shuffle of boots, the whisper of hands finding arrows in the dark. The English line stands still, water dripping from their helmets, pooling at their feet. They look ordinary, like farmers, bakers, men who have never owned a horse but know how to kill one. Below, the valley glitters faintly with armor and confusion. The French charge has turned into a traffic jam made of flesh and pride. Horses rear, slip, and crash into each other. Knights tumble into the mud, crushed by the very beasts they command. The shouts are no longer brave. They're wet, heavy, desperate. And in that sound, history shifts its weight. The English archers don't shout back. They don't need to. Each one knows the math of death. 12 arrows per minute, 5,000 men, and 60,000 chances per minute for someone below to stop moving. That's not war anymore. That's arithmetic. The first volley rises, a soft, sweeping sound, like fabric pulled through the air, multiplied by thousands. Then the sky darkens, briefly, impossibly, and arrows hiss down, striking armor, horses, mud. The sound isn't what you'd expect. It's not a clash. It's a thud. 1,000 small thuds that sound like rain with purpose. The knights look up too late. They lift shields that can't cover everything. They push forward because that's what they've always done. Forward, through pain, through reason, through centuries of habit. But there's nowhere to go. The longbow isn't elegant. It doesn't shimmer. It doesn't inspire poems. It simply works. The yew bends, groans, releases, again and again. Each draw line is a heartbeat. Each release, a small apocalypse. Imagine standing there. You can feel the bowstring hum against your cheek, taste the rain on your lips, and hear the whistle of an arrow vanishing into fog. You don't know whose life it ends. You just know that it does. The French try to climb the hill, but the ground betrays them. Horses collapse under their own weight, hooves kicking uselessly in the sludge. The knights behind can't stop in time. Steel slams into steel. The slope becomes a slow-moving avalanche of pride. Up above, the archers reload. No glory, no ceremony, just work. They loose another storm, and another, and another. By the time the second wave reaches the English line, it's already half dead. King Edward's son, the Black Prince, just 16, watches quietly. He's learning more about power today than any tutor could teach him. He sees how the old world ends, not in duels or banners, but in the slow humiliation of men who thought the world would always kneel. And then there's the old King of Bohemia. Blind, still determined to fight, he ties himself to his knights so they can lead him forward, his sword drawn, his honor intact, his sight irrelevant. They charge, not because they can win, but because they no longer remember how not to. The archers pause for a second, maybe out of respect. Then they fire anyway. When it's over, they find the old king's body, his hands still clutching the sword, his armor pierced, his face calm. A tragic beauty in the wrong century. Edward's son, moved, orders the Bohemian crest, 3 ostrich feathers, to be adopted as his own. You can still see them today, on the emblem of the Prince of Wales. The field now looks like something out of a bad dream. The French army, proud, shimmering, has become a single trembling organism of mud, armor, and breath. The Genoese crossbowmen are gone, the horses dead or limping, the air thick with smoke and feathers. You can smell iron, wet grass, and panic. It doesn't smell like victory, it smells like change. The archers keep shooting until the horizon stops moving. Their fingers are raw, their arms ache. They'll carry that ache for years, a quiet badge of the day the world got rearranged. No cheers rise from the hill, just a silence that feels larger than the sky. It's strange, really. The French knights came dressed for ceremony. Plumes, ribbons, painted shields. They'll leave as names on a casualty list. And the men who killed them won't even be remembered as individuals. Just the archers, the invisible hands of history. Somewhere, an Englishman drops his bow into the mud. His fingers tremble. He looks down at his work. The bodies, the broken armor, the feathers still falling. He doesn't smile. He just exhales, and the breath fogs into the cold air. That's what victory sounds like. Quiet, uneasy, uncelebrated. Down in the valley, a few knights still move. Their armor makes it hard to crawl, their swords heavy, their lungs wet. One tries to stand, slips, and vanishes beneath a wave of his own kind. A strange thought passes through the English lines. Not pride, not joy, but something colder. A realization that the world has just lost its symmetry, that the chain of command, ordained by God and gold, has snapped somewhere between the mud and the sky. No one says it aloud, but everyone feels it. The future has begun, and it smells like wet yew and iron. By sunset, the field is quiet. The last arrows lie buried in the ground, still humming faintly, like strings that don't yet know the song is over. Somewhere, a crow lands on a fallen helmet. It tilts its head, studies the ruin below, and begins to eat. Because crows don't care who was noble, they just know where the feast is. The longbow has done its work, and the world, though it doesn't realize it yet, has been rewritten by men with no titles, and too much patience. By nightfall, the rain has stopped pretending to matter. It falls softer now, as if exhausted by all the screaming. The battlefield exhales, a long, wet sigh, and nothing moves except the smoke, which seems hesitant even to rise. The English stand in silence, staring into a valley that no longer exists. It's just mud now, thick, shining, alive, swallowing hooves, armor, and pride without discrimination. The distinction between noble and common man is gone. Everything gleams the same shade of ruin. Above, you can almost hear the crows arguing, their wings heavy from the feast, waiting below. They don't sing, they gossip. That's how the world remembers wars, in small, black echoes that don't care who won. When the counting begins, the numbers sound wrong. 1,500 nobles, 11 princes, a king's brother, a duke who once thought himself immortal. Gone. The English lost 40, maybe fewer. No one is sure. No one ever is when the mud keeps swallowing evidence. The French banners lie tangled, their colours dulled by rain, looking like laundry abandoned on Judgment Day. Once, these flags commanded armies and oaths. Now, they decorate puddles. In the English camp, the mood isn't triumph. It's disbelief, the kind of quiet that follows when the world changes without warning. The archers sit with their hands bandaged, their faces blank. They don't cheer or weep. They just stare at what they've done. A valley full of men who believed God graded courage by ancestry. It's strange how fast arrogance decomposes. All it takes is one bad afternoon, 5 centuries of armor, gone in the time it takes to draw a bow. You could call it justice, or you could just call it mud having a sense of humor. The nobles die as they lived, noisy, ornamented, and entirely sure it's someone else's fault. Their armor still shines even in death, a cruel kind of beauty. The peasants who come later to strip the corpses will call it the field of the cloth of gold. A joke so sharp it almost feels respectful, because under all that gold and silk, they all rot the same. If you listen closely, you might still hear the echo of that old idea, that courage is born, not made, that some men were chosen to rule and others to serve. Crécy buried that idea deeper than any sword ever could. The survivors tell stories that night. Some speak of divine intervention, others of luck, but the truth is simpler. The English didn't win because they prayed harder. They won because they prepared better, because they listened to rain, not prophecy. You can imagine Edward's tent, quiet, lit by a single candle. He sits with parchment and ink, noting what went right and what went wrong, his face calm, his hands steady. He isn't drunk on victory. He's a man who understands mathematics. Across the valley, Philip of France lies wounded and silent. He's lost his army, his lords, his pride, and whatever patience heaven had left for him. Someone once said kings are chosen by God, but tonight, God seems undecided. At dawn, the peasants arrive. The living kind, not the kind who hold bows. They come for what's left. Rings pulled from fingers, armor pried from corpses with sticks, coins scraped from the mud. They move quietly, like men in a church, but their prayers are practical. No one tries to stop them. Even the English look away. Because war always ends this way, with the rich feeding the poor, just not in the way sermons promised. The air stinks of iron and tallow. Flies start their endless chorus. Everywhere you look, there's a lesson, but none of them sound noble. The idea of chivalry, that polished illusion of grace, now lies face down in a ditch, wearing a visor full of mud. Someone tries to collect the fallen banners for ransom. Another man laughs. "No one's left to pay," he says. It's a short laugh, the kind that ends quickly because there's nothing funny about being right. For centuries, Europe had worshipped the knight, the shining savior, the mounted god, the flawless killer. Crécy proved he was just another man who bleeds when hit and sinks when soaked. The archers didn't just kill soldiers, they killed the mythology of privilege. Each arrow pierced more than armor. It punctured a story humanity had been telling itself for too long. And once that story dies, you can't bring it back. By the second morning, the battlefield smells of rot and realization. The survivors walk among the bodies, stepping carefully, as if still afraid to disturb what they've undone. No trumpets play, no priests preach. Only the wind moves freely now, carrying whispers of names that won't mean anything soon. Edward's men gather what they can, but they don't gloat. You can't gloat at something that feels like gravity. This wasn't a victory of glory. It was a victory of inevitability. In the distance, someone finds a knight's helmet filled with rainwater. He tips it, drinks, and says nothing. The war will continue. Of course it will. But something invisible has already ended. The French nobles will rebuild their armies, forge new armor, paint new coats of arms, but none of it will matter the same way again, because the peasants have tasted power. And once you've seen a man in silk fall to a man in mud, you start to question everything. That's how revolutions begin, quietly, in the silence after thunder, not with speeches, but with thoughts that refuse to go back to sleep. And somewhere on that hill, where arrows still stick from the ground like weeds, an English archer picks up a broken feather, twirls it between his fingers, and smiles just a little. Not out of joy, but because he understands what few do, that the world has just lost its balance, and it's never getting it back. The crows have finished their work by now. The field that once roared with banners and names lies quiet again, except for the low hum of flies and the faint rustle of flags too torn to mean anything. Time begins to reclaim what men once tried to immortalize, and history, patient as ever, sits down to take notes. The Battle of Crécy doesn't end when the arrows stop. It ends in the silence afterward, when everyone realizes the rules have changed and no one sent a memo. War, that old theatre of pageantry and pride, has just been rewritten by peasants with mud on their boots. They don't know it yet, but they've just killed the age of heroes. For 500 years, Europe believed in the glittering lie of chivalry. It sounded noble: courage, loyalty, faith, mercy. But like most beautiful ideas, it only worked from a distance. Up close, it smelled of blood and perfume, the code of men who never had to clean their own armor. At Crécy, that illusion collapsed, not with a grand declaration, but with the soft hiss of arrows in the rain. No duel, no trumpet, just a rhythm too mechanical to romanticize. Skill, not birth. Discipline, not destiny. A bowstring, pulled by calloused fingers, did what centuries of sermons and swords could not. It made men equal, at least for a moment. It's tempting to say the world learned something that day, but history rarely learns. It merely changes costume. The longbow gave way to gunpowder soon after, and even the humble archer became obsolete. A peasant with a musket replaced the peasant with a bow, and the same story began again. New tools, old pride. Still, Crécy left a scar deeper than any wound. It whispered that no class, no title, no armor could shield you from evolution. That arrogance is always the slowest thing to die. That the end of an age never feels like an ending until the bodies start to rust. You can picture the poets of the time struggling with it, trying to rhyme courage with mud, to write sonnets about men shot down by farmers. It didn't fit the rhythm of romance. It was too honest, too wet. The French chroniclers called it tragedy. The English called it providence. But both sides missed the point. Crécy wasn't divine justice or blind fate. It was logistics. It was preparation. It was the moment humanity realized that bravery without brains is just decoration. Edward III didn't know it then, but his victory planted a quiet revolution. It told the world that the battlefield no longer belonged to those who inherited it, but to those who understood it. That technology, even when made of wood and string, is more loyal than any oath. And the irony: within a century, the longbow itself would fall to gunfire, a new sound for a new age. The very peasants who destroyed chivalry would one day find themselves replaced by men with smoke and powder in their hands. Progress has no favorites. It simply keeps marching. Somewhere in that irony, though, there's poetry. The blind king of Bohemia. Remember him? He died tied to his knights, charging into the storm he couldn't see. A symbol of faith, courage, and complete miscalculation. He became a legend, but not for the reasons he intended, because his death, noble as it was, stood as the final gesture of a dying religion, the religion of valor for valor's sake. He rode into chaos, believing that honor alone could outpace arrows. He was wrong, but he was magnificent in his mistake. Edward's son, the Black Prince, took the Bohemian feathers as his emblem, 3 white plumes curving above the words Ich dien. I serve. A strange motto for a prince, but fitting for a boy who just watched nobility die. If you visit that field today, there's no glory left. Just grass, a few stones, and the faint echo of something important that once happened there. The wind still moves through it like a whisper, not mournful, just indifferent. Because time doesn't mourn endings. It composts them. The villagers nearby will tell you the ground is still rich, that crops grow well where nights once sank. Maybe that's the truest legacy of Crécy. Even in decay, pride feeds something useful. Historians call it the dawn of modern warfare, but modern is just another way of saying we found a new method of disappointment. Chivalry died in the mud, yes, but the hunger for superiority survived just fine. It traded armor for uniforms, horses for engines, and kept marching under different flags. Still, on quiet nights, if you listen to the rain long enough, you can almost hear the echo of those arrows, the faint reminder that once, for a few wet hours in 1346, the world paused and saw itself clearly. Not kings, not heroes, just men. That's the strange comfort in Crécy's legacy. It's not about victory, it's about the humbling symmetry of all things. How mud equalizes every name, how time forgets who wore the crown and who carried the bow. History doesn't care who you are. It only cares that you show up, do your part, and eventually make room for the next fool who thinks he's invincible. And that really is how the Middle Ages ended, not with a sword raised to heaven, but with 1,000 arrows falling softly through the rain. The rain has stopped now. The arrows have fallen silent. Only the wind remains, soft, uncertain, as if afraid to disturb the ghosts still sleeping in the mud. Somewhere, a banner still flutters weakly in the night air. The scent of wet earth, of smoke and iron, lingers like memory itself. If you listen closely, you can almost hear the bowstrings again, a faint echo beneath the breathing of time. But that field is far away now. You and I are back here in the quiet. The war has dimmed. The candles burn low. History closes its eyes. And for a moment, everything feels still again. If you felt something tonight, a chill, a thought, a quiet pull toward the past, let it stay with you a while. And if you'd like to wander through more forgotten corners of history, leave a gentle like. Share this calm space with someone who dreams as you do, and let your fingertips find subscribe. So the next story will find you, softly, when the night turns still. The past will always be here, dusty, patient, half awake, waiting for someone curious enough to listen. Good night, and we will meet again.